This is an I Am Listening original podcast.
Every day I'm seeing new voices in reform that are looking to be the future leaders of the party once Farage's tenure does eventually come to an end. And I believe that with constant changing policy and constant evolving situations, there's going to be a desire for reform in the foreseeable future. I don't believe we're a one-trick pony party, and I believe that reform is much bigger than Nigel Farage.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on local and national political matters. Join us as we take a deep dive into local government across the county. Find out what the key decision makers have to say, what your money is being spent on, and how the party's policies could affect how we live. Engage with us as we delve into the issues that matter to you and explore the dynamic world of politics from a Kent perspective.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast. In a week, it was revealed how a town had lost out on £6 billion of health cash despite being promised it. The future of makeup of councils throughout the county became clear, and KCC chiefs went to Parliament to talk about how badly run road closures are making people's lives a misery. I'm Simon Finlay, the local democracy reporter covering Kent County Council, and I'm joined by Robert Boddy, who represents Medway Council.
Hello.
And Dan Eston is back, who reports on the borough and district councils. Welcome back, Dan.
Thank you. Hello.
And we were hoping to welcome the Weald of Kent MP Katie Lamb to the show as a special guest, but unfortunately she's had to pull out. In her place, however, we have a chat with Reform's William Fotheringham-Bray, who found himself in a bit of bother at the weekend after a drunken video was leaked. First up, Robert, what's been going on at Medway?
So the residents of Strood, one of Medway's 5 towns, were allocated £6 million by the then Kent and Medway Clinical Commissioning Group in 2017, which was supposed to go to a healthy living centre. 8 years later, councillors used a health and adult social care committee to find out what actually happened, since no healthy living centre has arrived in Strood.
OK, and what was the answer?
Well, in 2022, the Clinical Commissioning Group was replaced with the Integrated Care Board. Up until that point, says Mike Gilbert, Director of Corporate Governance at the NHS Kent and Medway ICB, nothing appears to have been done with the money. No plans were made to use it. In 2022, the ICB was under pressure from NHS England to return the funding to central government, but they managed to reach an agreement where the £6 million would be used for a healthy living centre, just not one in Strood. It was combined with another £8.5 million of funding for a healthy living centre in Chatham, which is currently in the process of being delivered as the James Williams Healthy Living Centre in the Pentagon Shopping Centre.
OK, so what's happening with the Strood Healthy Living Centre?
Well, it's basically back to square one. Though it was back to square one in late 2023 when the decision to reallocate the money was made, except nobody knew. The ICB says it is looking at the need of residents in Strood and identifying possible sites, but councillors were pretty firm they want a healthy living centre in Strood as promised, and then the challenge becomes finding new source of funding for the centre.
Dan, what have you been looking at this week? Welcome back, by the way. Haven't seen you for a while.
So this week it's crunch time for Kent's 14 councils to tell the government exactly how they want to be split up. As of recording this, their collective official position hasn't been released yet, but I've been reading up on all the official proposals which have been making their way around councils this week.
Any predictions?
Sort of, but not entirely. So at first, a few of us thought that the county would be split into 2 gigantic unitary authorities, one in the east and one in the west. That idea hasn't even cropped up in the official papers that have been doing the rounds, because those 2 councils would be massive, with probably 800,000, 1 million people each or something like that. Instead, the papers that all the councils have been looking at this week say that Kent's probably going to be split into 3 or maybe even 4 separate councils. East and west are obviously going to exist, but there's probably going to be a North Kent authority too, definitely including what's currently Dartford, Gravesham and Medway as expected, but also possibly Swale, either in whole or in part. And there's also a chance that a big strip might be cut out of the middle to form either a Mid-Kent council of Swale, Ashford and Folkestone, or a South Kent one out of Ashford, Folkestone and Dover.
The fact that the councils are looking at official proposals now suggests things are moving along quite well, then, doesn't it? What's the timeline?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to take a while, obviously, but as you've written about before, they asked, they weren't especially happy about the fact they asked to be put on this priority list for accelerated reorganisation, which would have seen all this happen probably in the next couple of years. But the documents council have been looking at this week say that the new system will definitely be enforced from April 1st, 2028. Obviously, that's quite a while away, but in a more immediate sense, the deadline for Kent's councils to send their preferences to the government is this Friday, the day most people will be listening to this. Thereafter, it's anyone's guess when the government will actually come back to them, but presumably it means the central government will start drawing up their final plan, taking on board what our 14 councils told them they would want.
So Simon, what have you been working on this week?
Well, it's roadworks again this week. Kent County Council has gone back to the House of Commons Select Committee, the Transport Select Committee, to provide further evidence about the ever-growing disruption caused by roadworks. KCC was represented by Neil Edwards, who was trying to get across the fact that the level of closures, especially by utility companies, is having a real effect on the way people are living their lives in the county. Of course, this is off the back of the massive house building programme going on in Kent year on year.
What does KCC want?
Well, the council feels that there needs to be a total rethink about how KCC is allowed to manage the road closures. This may to a change or a tweak in the legislation, so the council is in a better position to either plan or coordinate the closure requests, which presently it has little or no control over.
Will they get it?
Possibly. But some people I've spoken to seem to think this is a bit of a nod to the councils across the country and to show that they're being listened to, or it's a way of kind of negating the power of the issue before the May 1 elections. But a KCC statement said, distinct from just some sort of context, the KCC statement said, distinct from works done to repair or maintain the road itself, which is usually done by KCC, street works are works carried out by utility companies to install, repair or maintain their services, including water, gas, electricity and communications, including broadband. These usually involve digging up roads or pavements, causing disruption to the travelling public, and can affect the surface quality, integrity and lifespan of the road and pavements. That's just some sort of a bit of context for that.
Is there a topic that you would like to be discussed on the Kent Politics podcast? Perhaps you've got a question for one of our panel, or you'd like to comment on a hot topic in local or national government. Get in touch by emailing or sending a voice note to kentpoliticspodcast@thekmgroup.co.uk.
Our special guest this week almost caused the shock of the 2024 general election when he came within a few hundred votes of winning the previously safe Conservative seat of Sittingbourne and Sheppey for Reform UK. William Fotheringham-Bray is a 24-year-old from Sheerness who has high hopes for the party and for himself in politics. But those ambitions took a bit of a knock at the weekend when he was suspended after a drunken video of him criticising a colleague emerged online. William, welcome to the Kent Politics podcast.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Without going into too much of the detail or the background of what sparked this incident, it kind of shows the danger of the mobile phone in the hands of a politician, doesn't it?
Absolutely indeed.
As I understand it, you've been out with some friends in Sittingbourne, and what happened next?
Oh, well, I'll get to that question. I wanted to immediately start with an apology to, one, the person who I'm accused of the misconduct, and two, to the party as a whole, who have caused an incredible amount of embarrassment, and I just wanted to make that one of my first statements.
Okay, well, fine. Okay, well, you were on the train. What happened?
So I was communicating with a group chat that I was a part of, which was filled with I don't know the exact number, but it was filled with young members of Reform, such as myself, and we were discussing the ongoing Rupert Lowe situation, and for some reason, I felt compelled to make a video of myself explaining a current situation that I was going through, and used less than savoury language to describe it.
Were you drunk at the time? How much did you have to drink?
Enough.
Okay, right. So, I mean, this was meant to be a small private chat. So how did it end up going, virtually viral, and you were across the news? Well, how did that happen? I
spoke with the people who ran the group chat, and they suspect that there was a bad actor got into the group chat and was monitoring the activity, and just took it from there.
How many people were in that chat?
I don't know the exact number, but if I had to take a guess, I would say between 20 and 40.
Okay, so it's small, but it's not tiny. Okay, so you are where you're at. You've just started this interview at the top by apologising. I mean, what was the immediate fallout as soon as you knew that this has kind of hit the newsstands, as it were?
Well, for me, I was absolutely embarrassed and mortified, and I only knew it could end poorly for me. And over the past couple of days, it has it's taken a severe toll on my mental health.
Mm-hmm. In what way? Can you describe that to me?
Well, first off, it was a great breach of my trust, because I thought, I was speaking in confidence to friends. So it's definitely taken a toll on my trust, because I'm quite a trusting person. I like to think I'm quite an honest person. So that definitely took a toll. And it was just so embarrassing for the world to see this part of me, which isn't me. You know, it's not who I am. It's just a mistake of mine that has gotten out of hand. And now when I go around in public, I'm thinking people are going to recognize me and they're only going to see me for a drunk face they see on the news.
Just for clarity, where do you stand in terms of Reform UK at the minute?
Well, as you said, I've been suspended, but I still support the party in its entirety, and I still support its actions and its campaigning, and I'm still behind the party.
Okay. I mean, silly question, perhaps you've answered it already, but do you regret what you did?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I regret what I did. It's something that it's going to take a while for me to get over.
Okay. I mean, you're only 24. Now, are you kind of worried this will sort of follow you around in terms of your career and things?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I want to aspire to do bigger things. That's why I got into politics, because I wanted to serve my community. And now there's this video of me acting a fool, and I'm worried for any future employment. I had aspirations to try and get into teaching, and now it's who's going to want a drunk idiot as a teacher? Eh?
I mean, the chap that you had this beef with and who sparked that video that you made, would you like to meet him and clear the air?
Yeah, I'd like to just have a one-on-one talk with him, express my deepest apologies and how I sincerely wanted this to be just between us, a private matter. It's incredibly regrettable that it's gotten out into the public, and I'd like to talk to him privately and just get all of the laundry out, air it out, you know?
Yeah, okay. On a wider point, Reform UK has come a long way in a very short time, and you were one of the principal architects of that result last year, and you came within just a few hundred votes of taking Sittingbourne and Sheppey. Can you put your finger on why Reform has suddenly gathered such momentum in the last year?
Well, the reason that I joined Reform is because, much like me and millions of other people across the United Kingdom, we're just fed up with the way that we're being governed by a Labour and a Tory party that don't seem to that don't seem to be opposed to each other in any way, and only enact policies that tend to harm the British public instead of actually aiding the British public. And I feel that message has resonated a lot with the British public, with what Reform is trying to bring to everyone. They're trying to bring prosperity to Britain, prosperity that we once had, and it's especially here in the north of Kent, in Sheppey in particular, which is one of the more deprived areas. There is a longing for that kind of prosperity to be felt again, and Reform's tapping into that, and I believe that's something that they can deliver.
Okay. Do you think there's any way back for your political career?
I desperately hope so. I would not blame Reform entirely if they decided not to move forward with me. I understand. I do want to be a voice and be someone in my community who can bring that change. This stain on me is going to bring great difficulty to that, but I feel like with the right amount of time and effort and explanation and understanding, I can bounce back. Here's hoping.
There has been some speculation about the future of Nigel Farage, and that he might step down or he might be pushed out. After all, Reform is something of a one-trick pony, and they very much rely on him. Do you think there's any validity in that argument?
I don't think Nigel Farage is going anywhere anytime soon. He is the face of this party. He has been in politics for so long. He's the face of the British right, and I don't think he'll be stepping down anytime soon. Every day, I'm seeing new voices in Reform that are looking to be the future leaders of the party once Farage's tenure does eventually come to an end. And I believe that with constant changing policy and constant evolving situations, there's going to be a desire for reform in the foreseeable future. I don't believe we're a one-trick pony party, and I believe that reform is much bigger than Nigel Farage.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much indeed for your time today, and all the best for the future.
Thank you very much.
The government this week laid out plans to make radical changes to the benefit system in this country. And it has drawn a lot of criticism from the Labour backbenches, where MPs are furious their party could focus on the vulnerable in this way. But, what are the politics of it? Dan, is this a disaster for Labour, or do you think voters might sympathise with the effort to get people back into work?
It depends what you mean. It won't win the government any more supporters within the already dwindling ranks of the Labour Party. It won't be popular around people on the left and Labour members. In terms of the politics of it, it's essentially what you'd expect. The Labour Party proposes cuts. The Conservative Party proposes even more cuts, harder and faster, as our own Kent MP Helen Whately, who's Shadow Minister for Welfare, suggested in Parliament this week when these changes were announced. It depends what you mean by support. I mean, I think the median public position is that the benefit system should be extremely generous to people who actually need it and extremely harsh to people who misuse or abuse or mistreat it in any way. The question is how widespread is abuse and fraud and misuse of the benefit system, and it's there's probably a reasonable amount of it, but it's a very, very easy target. There's probably not as much of it as people like to believe, and it's an easy go-to target for the government. Need to save a bit of money, you cut benefits, and obviously they point at examples like the misuse of the Motability scheme for buying new cars for people who have, for example, mental health problems. We're street thinking on the news and say that mental health problems are overdiagnosed, for example, and that contributes to the misuse of the benefit system. While there may be, most people would accept that there is. Mental health problems don't just materialise like physical health problems do. There is something about the world that people live in which creates mental health problems. People aren't just more depressed than they are today than they were 40 years ago for no reason.
Is it just because the benefits are kind of more available? Rob?
I think the thing about this whole thing is, the thing I find confusing is there are certain elements that seem to contradict one another. One of the major tenets that the Labour government are really pushing on is if you're healthy enough to work, you should be in work, which I think is a fair assessment, and I think most people will agree with that. I think that's quite an uncontroversial thing to say. But there are also assumptions about some of the things that have been taken away. For example, we talk about cars, were adaptations for cars that help disabled people
get to work.
Exactly. Yeah. But these are being withdrawn. So you think, well, you want people to go to work if they can. These things enable people to get to work. So why are you taking them away? But I think Dan's not necessarily wrong in the sense of there is a perception, whether it's right or wrong, among the general public that a lot of people abuse the benefit system. You've had television programs like Benefit Street and Skin and all these different ones. Yeah. And so the general perception among people is that benefits are abused. And so if you're the government and you need to save a bit of money, it's quite easy to paint the cuts that you are making as we're cracking down on people who are claiming this when they shouldn't be. Whether that's actually true is kind of a different story, maybe.
I do get the impression that there are quite a few people out there who support the government because they think that people are misusing it, or that it's too easy to become dependent on benefits for people who can find a whole host and variety of different conditions and mental health disorders that will afford them that. I mean, and then on top of that, the Conservatives brought in the personal independence payment, PIPs is so called, and that was meant to be a fairer system. But then again, that also appears to be slightly abused as well. I mean, what do you reckon to that, Dan?
I think it's obviously a problem that any government in power at this time would have to reckon with. Obviously, there was a recent documentary, I think it was by Fraser Nelson on Channel 4, which talked about the state of Britain's benefit system, and Britain has one of the most expensive benefit systems per capita in terms of the money that the state spends on it of developed countries. The rate at which expenditure on benefits is expanding is obviously neither sustainable nor an accurate measure of the amount of the population who are actually sick or out of work in the way that most people would commonly conceive it. So reforms to the benefit system of some way, shape or form is completely inevitable. But the way they're implementing it is basically just going to be swinging cuts at the easiest targets, which is always what governments do when they feel they need to save money. And also, I think many people would rightly think it's a bit rich for the government to talk about need people in work if they're capable of working. Everyone agrees with that. But the government doesn't seem to be doing a massive amount to try and get people into work. Organisations like Tata Steel, thousands of people in South Wales will be out of a job due to the collapse of basically the last heavy industry manufacturing manufacturing in Britain, and the government, the supposed party of Labour, absolutely nothing to say about it. No plans to nationalise steel, no plans to nationalise any new industries, public work projects, nothing of the sort. So what they'll basically say is, cut your benefits, go find yourself a job, and whether the government seems to want to do anything to help people get a job is questionable.
Do you think that the Conservatives have put up much of a performance on this? I mean, our own local MP, Helen Whately, has been fighting the good fight for the Conservative cause, but then, someone else on the radio the other day was sort of saying, well, hang on a second, you were in power for 14 years, why didn't you sort this all out?
Yeah, and if the Conservatives have a problem with the way the benefit system runs, they have basically nobody but themselves to blame. The root and branch reform of benefits into universal credit in the early 2010s, especially with the abolition of short-term sickness benefits, is a direct and obvious incentive upon benefit claimants. If you're like short to medium-term sick, 3 to 6 months where you might be out of work because of a physical or psychological ailment, genuinely felt, which puts you out of work. There's very little means for people to get that kind of support for a short term now without it screwing them over on universal credit payments. So the incentive placed upon you is to sign off permanently. And it's small tweaks like that which seem bureaucratic, which actually massively alter the nature of the benefit system. And it's completely the work of the Conservatives. And in the early 2010s, they were making all these kinds of reforms to get headlines saying we're cutting bureaucracy and saving money. And what have they done? Created a huge, expensive, bloated bureaucracy, which doesn't work for the people who really need it and is now open to very obvious attack from the Labour Party. And all they have to say is, yes, please do it more and do it faster.
Rob, just to wrap this up, I mean, it's been really very much a scrap between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party on this particular issue, and I haven't heard that much from Reform. Do you think it's one of these situations where let them sort of just be as bad as each other and we'll say nothing or very little and hopefully sort of mop up the disaffected because of it?
I think that's certainly an element of it. I think another separate element is that reform works best when it doesn't have to pin itself down to a specific policy or thing. So if reform came out and said, this is our policy platform in terms of benefits,
people would start to pick holes out of it.
Yeah. And there is sort of a contradiction within reform, which I think hasn't really played out yet, but will, I think, as we get closer to the next election, which is they have a big base within sort of older people, who really support, so they gain a lot of support for their immigration policies, but a lot of people who support them gain a lot from the triple lock and a lot of these state benefits, which Nigel Farage's version of the Reform Party, there may be a split, we don't know, with Rupert Lowe kind of challenging him on this, but he is very much a small state kind of person. So whether that will ever actually play out of these people who like sort of big state when it comes to their benefits in terms of like the triple lock and these things for pensioners and all the rest of it, whether that will ever actually, people will be like, hang on a second, Nigel, I think you're suggesting cutting things that will benefit me. Whether that will ever come up, I don't know. But I think it's definitely a calculated move at the moment to keep quiet and let Labour and Conservatives knock chunks out of each other until whoever's left.
Okay, folks, that's it for this week's episode. Next week, we'll be speaking to the former Medway Council leader, Alan Jarrett, who retired 2 years ago after the local elections, which saw his ruling Tories replaced by Labour. Thanks to Rob and Dad for their contributions. And don't forget, you can keep an eye on KentOnline/politics for the latest news from across the county. You can also sign up for our politics briefing newsletter by visiting kentonline.co.uk/newsletters. And don't miss KMTV's politics show every Friday at 5 p.m. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Kent Politics Podcast. Don't forget to check out stories throughout the week on the politics page of Kent Online. And you can watch the Kent Politics Show on KMTV every Friday at 5 p.m. or on demand at kmtv.co.uk.
This has been an I Am Listening original podcast. For more information, head over to our website, im-listening.co.uk.